You sent the last message, they read it, and then nothing. No reply, no explanation, no closure, just silence. And if you're like most people, your brain immediately went to work on a very specific question. What did I do wrong? Maybe you replayed the last conversation. Maybe you analyzed your texts word by word. Maybe you convinced yourself it was something you said or did or something fundamentally wrong with you as a person. But here's what the science actually says. You're probably wrong. Not because you're perfect or because you never make mistakes, but because the research on ghosting tells a very different story than the one that most people who've ever been ghosted ever get to hear. Today, we're going to go through that story. We'll look at why we blame ourselves, why that instinct, even though it's understandable, can be harmful to us, and what the research actually tells us about why people ghost. And at the end, I'll give you the honest take, what you actually owe yourself in this situation. Let's start. So let's start with the uncomfortable part, the part that feels true even when it isn't. Here are 5 reasons why we tend to blame ourselves when we get ghosted by somebody else. The first reason is that when somebody ghosts you, they don't give you a reason. And here's the thing about the human brain. It hates uncertainty even more than it hates bad news. Psychologists call this our need for closure. This is our desire to have a clear and firm answer rather than sit in ambiguity. Studies out of the University of Maryland found that people with a high need for closure are more distressed by ambiguity and will work overtime to generate explanation, even if those explanations are not accurate. When no external explanation is given, our mind turns inward. It fills the void with whatever feels most available. And when it comes to rejection, the most available explanation is almost always about us. The second reason is there's a concept in psychology called the Fundamental Attribution Error. This is one of the most replicated findings, and it describes our tendency to explain other people's behavior by pointing to their character and their personality, while we overlook the situation that they're in at the time. So here's the irony. When you're the one who ghosts somebody else, you have a list of reasons. You were overwhelmed, you didn't know what to say, the timing was bad, life got complicated. But when somebody else ghosts you, your instinct is usually to skip straight to, it must be because of me. I wasn't interesting enough. I wasn't attractive enough. I wasn't good enough. Making the attribution error, you're blaming yourself when you should also be looking at the other person and at their circumstances, the situation that they're in. The third reason is that rejection really does hurt. It's not a metaphor. Neuroimaging studies out of UCLA found that social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain. That area of the brain lights up when you experience exclusion or rejection. When something hurts this much, the brain wants to make sense of it to make it hurt less. And self-blame is super fast. It's the ready-made answer. The problem is sometimes it is the wrong one. Another reason is that there's something that we do called rumination. This is our tendency to replay events in our minds. This is research out of Yale showing that rumination is linked to higher rates of anxiety and depression, and it distorts our thinking. When we replay the conversations and the dates and the messages and the texts, we're not really doing impartial analysis. We're doing motivated reasoning. We're searching for evidence that confirms what we already are afraid of, that the problem is really us. And if we look hard enough, then our minds will find evidence that it's about us. But in fact, it might not be. So here's where I want to be direct with you. Blaming yourself for being ghosted is not just probably wrong, it's actually actively harmful for you. So let me explain. What it does is it reduces your self-esteem. Studies on ghosting found that being ghosted leads to more distress than conventional breakup when somebody tells you they don't want to see you again, or when somebody tells you they don't want to work with you anymore. This is because there's no closure with ghosting. There's no feedback. There's nothing actionable that you can do. And research published in psychology finds that people who are ghosted experience drops in their self-esteem, and they feel more anxious about relationships in the future. In some cases, it causes them to mistrust other people in the long term. Here's the problem. When you blame yourself for something you don't actually understand, you're absorbing a wound that doesn't have a lesson attached to it. Self-criticism is useful only when it leads to growth. Self-blame in a vacuum, it just hurts you. It doesn't teach you how to be better. So let me offer you a way to reframe this. What does it actually mean when somebody ghosted you? It means basically that they chose silence over talking to you and explaining why they don't want to work or be with you anymore. It means that they prioritize their own comfort over clarity with you. That's not a character verdict on you. That's information about them and their emotion regulation skills and their willingness to handle discomfort and their communication style and perhaps their constraints or stress that they're under. The thing is, research shows that ghosting causes emotional pain on both sides, not just on the person who was ghosted, but also on the person who ghosted. There are also people called serial ghosters. These are people who ghost others habitually. That doesn't happen because they hate people, but because of a pattern or behavior that they've learned over time. If you were ghosted by a serial ghoster, then the person before you was probably also ghosted too, and the person after you will be as well. It's not about you. Just because they didn't reply doesn't mean that you're not interesting. Just because they stopped texting you back doesn't mean you're not worth someone's time. You don't want to catastrophize things. If you were to do that, you would be taking one ambiguous event with one person and using it to update your entire belief system about yourself. The problem is that you don't have information to justify that update. What you have is silence, and silence is not really data. So if it's probably not about you, then what is it about? Here's what the research actually says. One of the most robust findings in this space comes from attachment theory, originally developed by John Bowlby. It describes how our early relationships with caregivers shape our adult patterns in relationships. Now, the research finds that people with avoidant attachment styles are significantly more likely to ghost. Why? Because avoidant attachment is characterized by discomfort with emotional closeness. It's characterized by the tendency to suppress feelings and a preference for withdrawal over stress. For somebody with an avoidant attachment style, ghosting isn't about the other person almost at all. It's just an escape mechanism and a way to reduce their own emotional discomfort by basically disappearing. The assessments are that about 20% of adults have an avoidant attachment style, and so that means that about 20% of adults are more likely to ghost. Another relevant finding is that research consistently shows that one of the most common reasons people give for ghosting is wanting to avoid conflict. The studies show that people who ghost others cite the desire to avoid a difficult conversation as the motivation. So that's important. Ghosting is easier for the person doing it, at least in the short term. They don't have to manage their discomfort. They can just disappear. So it's not really a reflection of you again. It's a reflection of their lack of emotional courage. Another reason that's not really related to you why somebody might ghost you is the uncomfortable but worth knowing idea of the dark triad. Studies find that individuals who score higher on narcissistic traits are also more likely to ghost, mainly because their primary concern is their own comfort or discomfort. So people who ghost others tend to be, not always, but tend to be higher in narcissism. And again, that's not really about you. Another reason why ghosting is not really about you is the modern relationship culture. So researchers out of Georgetown coined the term relationshopping to describe how dating apps these days have changed the psychology of social connection. When we swipe through people's profiles like products in the marketplace, what we're doing is we're developing a consumer mindset about people. One where we can take a product and the first sign of displeasure, we can just throw it back in the shelf. And when we do that with people, that can lead to ghosting. Again, this is not about you. This is just the culture that we live in. Finally, here's one that often gets overlooked. People who ghost are sometimes not in a good emotional state. They might be overwhelmed or anxious or depressed or going through something very difficult that's not really their fault. But they're just not in a place where they can have a difficult conversation where they tell you they don't want to work with you or be with you anymore. Somebody who just went through a divorce or lost a job or is managing anxiety or another crisis, that person may ghost you for reasons of mental health for them. Yes, they're also hurting you in the process, and I'm not justifying that, but the reason that they're doing it is really not about you. It's about their own situation. Okay, so having talked about all this, how it's not really your fault that you were ghosted, I do want to give you the full picture because I don't want this video to be a permission to stop reflecting and stop improving. Yes, the research strongly suggests that ghosting says more about the person who does it than the person who receives it. But here's what good thinking requires of you. We should always consider both sides of an interaction. The fact that ghosting is probably about them doesn't mean that you have nothing to learn from it. It means that you should ask better questions of yourself. So instead of asking something like, what's wrong with me? You can ask, what kind of connections am I attracting and why? Am I communicating in ways that set healthy expectations? Or is there anything about my behavior in early interactions that I could reflect on, not to explain the ghosting away, but to grow as a person? That's an entirely different set of questions. It's not self-blame, but rather it's questions that are designed to grow and develop you as a person. The goal isn't to become somebody who never gets ghosted because, as we said, we have a culture of ghosting. We have people who are more prone to ghosting others. But the goal is to attract people who have secure attachment, who have high emotional intelligence, who have strong communication skills and deep self-awareness, so that you are less likely to be ghosted in general. In other words, the goal is to be the best version of yourself that you can be, not because that will prevent rejection completely, but because it would lead to better relationship with people who are worthwhile of your time. So here's the takeaway I want to leave you with. When someone ghosts you, your brain will immediately tell you it's your fault. That instinct is totally human and totally understandable, but it's almost certainly wrong. The research tells us that ghosting is driven by attachment avoidance, by fear of conflict, personality factor, and the cultural platform that we're on. It's not some fundamental flaw about you. Now, this doesn't mean that you can just stop growing. You can always continue to work on yourself. It's a lifelong pursuit. It does mean that you should stop absorbing somebody else's emotional limitation as a reflection of your worth. Their silence is not data for you. So if you found this helpful, there's a lot more where this came from. There's a lot of research-backed insights on leadership and psychology and relationships that I will give to you. So subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.